Welcome back to the Unreal for Unity Developers tutorial series. In this tutorial, we are going to jump into some blueprints and just do a little bit more work in the blueprint editor so that we can get comfortable in there and get accustomed to modifying blueprints. Now, what we're going to end up doing here is taking the default third-person character, the one that's included with the template that we used, and we're going to add a double jump ability. And we're actually going to end up doing it twice, just so we can see two different ways of doing things. So let's just jump straight in. Now, so I'll give you a quick recap. So what we did last time is we created a jump pad in here so that we can hit that, and when we overlap it, we bounce around. So one thing I don't really like right here is the way the controls feel. So if you hit this jump pad, you can see that there's not really much in-air control. So this is Unreal, so of course they give us millions of different options. So let's go ahead and open up the third-person character that Unreal provides with the template. And to do that, just click on the character, and you can see it'll be selected in the world outliner. And right next to it will be a little link that says Edit Third-Person Character. So if we go ahead and click on this, it's going to open up the blueprint for us. So here is our third-person character. And it's very similar to how you would create things in Unity, where you'd have a capsule collider, and then you would have your skeletal mesh in there. Now, with Unreal, there's the addition of what's called a character movement component. And this is a super handy little component that takes care of all kinds of stuff with regard to character movement. So with Unity, we might add a character controller, and what that's going to end up giving us is a nice little base to work with, where we have the move and the simple move functions that we can call to move our character around the world without having to resort to rigid body physics. But that's where it ends. This is, again, one of the examples showing that because Epic makes games with this engine, everything that they provide is just so much more detailed and configurable. This character movement component is one of the best examples in here. It actually uses the exact same NVIDIA PhysX character controller under the covers that Unity uses. It's just that this provides a layer on top that's just loaded with configuration options. But we're not going to go through all of them because, I mean, this component could have 15 videos all on its own. It's so configurable and so powerful. But what we're going to do is just fix the in-air settings. So we want to get a little bit more control back when we're in the air. So what we can do is when we select the component, we can go into the details panel, and there's a search here, and we can start typing in things that we think might be relevant. So maybe air. And you can see right here we have air control and air control boost multiplier. So let's hover over this and see what it says. So it's the amount of lateral movement control available to the character. 1 would be full control, 0 would be none. So let's give it a little bit more, maybe 0.8. So whenever we change something in a blueprint, remember we have to compile. Now, in this particular case, we didn't actually change any blueprint visual scripting nodes. So we don't really, when you click the compile button, it actually compiles all of the nodes and all of the things that you changed. And it'll show errors if there's an error in your logic when you're actually doing visual scripting. But in this particular case, we made a change, and we're just going to click play, and Unreal will actually, under the covers, handle the compilation of that for us. And because all we did is change a value, we don't really care about seeing any issues in the error panel. So if we go ahead and hit this jump pad now, you can see we have a lot more control, and perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. All right, so that's enough of that. Let's actually jump in here and start doing some blueprint visual scripting. So by default, this is what you get with the third-person character controller. And this is going to be a little bit daunting at first, but we're not going to really be looking at too much of this here. We're actually going to just be looking at the jump section. And you'll notice that Unreal comments everything. They organize everything nicely in here. So you can see this is organized into the movement input and touch input and jump, mouse input. For now, let's just get rid of this so that we have less things to look at. And there's also VR orientation and pose. We don't need that either. So I'm just selecting and clicking the delete key. So the less we have to look at, the less daunting things are. And now if we look at each one of these separately, it's pretty manageable. So what we want is the jump section. Let's just take that, bring it down here. Okay, so right now it doesn't really get much simpler than this. So we have an event that happens, the jump event. This is they basically did a input binding to the spacebar so that when you push the spacebar, this jump event will actually occur. So anytime the spacebar is pressed, this will be called, and it's very simple. It calls jump or stop jumping, and the configuration for jump would be in our character movement here. So we take a look at jump. We have a jump z velocity of 600. So if we were to bump that up to say 6,000 and push play, you can see we can jump for reals now. All right, so let's bounce that back. If we go over here, reset that back to 600, we can see that Unreal handles a lot of stuff for us. This is the jumping, stop jumping is all built in. We're going to take advantage of that when we go ahead and add double jump. So what we're going to do first is I'm actually going to add a second jump event here. So if we go over here and type jump, you're going to see we have lots of different options. There's a bunch of things on the character that let us know if we can jump, and stop jumping, jump, we've already seen those functions, but what we want is the event. So this is the input event jump. So now it's identical to this. So we could have also just done a good old-fashioned copy paste, Control C, Control V, and done the same thing. But I think for now it's going to be better to actually use the tools in here for adding nodes so that we get used to things. So I mentioned that we're going to do this two different ways. And the first way that we're going to do this is we're going to use what's called a gate. So let's go ahead and drag off of this pin and add a new node. So if we type in gate, you'll see we have flow control, and we have two different things. We have a gate and a multi-gate. So if we hover over them, we get tooltips, and I'm going to go ahead and just add that. So what we have here is the basic gate. And this allows us to control the flow of execution by just opening and closing the gate or toggling. So for our purposes, we need to actually have a little bit more control than that. We want to double jump. So we're going to need something that allows us to check the flow of execution across two different parameters, because the first time we do a jump, we're going to call the jump, and then what we want to do is the second time the jump button's pressed, we're going to want to add a little bit of z velocity to our character, but then the third time it's pressed, we don't want to do anything. So let's take a look at the multi-gate and see if that works a little bit better for us. Okay, so this looks good. We have multiple output pins, and you can see here there's an add pin button, so you can actually add even more outputs to this if you needed them. Now for our particular case, we just need two. So I'm going to go ahead and right click these and remove execution. So for now, we're going to use the built-in debugging mechanism. We looked at this very briefly before, but if we type in the word print, you'll see we have here print string. So I'm going to stick one over here and one over here. So now we have two print strings, and we'll just say this one, we'll type in first, and this one second. So if we remember, what print string node does is it prints to the log, but it also prints to the screen, which is really handy. So we're actually in here messing with nodes now, so now we might want to start using this compile button. When we click compile, you can see we get a green check mark. And that's good. That means that we don't have any mistakes in our blueprint. So let's go ahead and push play and see what we get. So I'm going to go ahead and press the space bar. You can see we have first. I'm going to push the space bar again. We have second. I'm going to push the space bar again, and you'll see we have nothing. So not quite what we want, but it's getting there. So what this basically is doing here is each time we come into this node, there's a little internal counter. You can see the start index indicates that starts at -1. So what it does is it increments it. So the first time we hit this gate, the index is going to be -1 + 1, which brings us to 0. So now that's where we have this out 0, and it comes through here. Next time we come in, it increments it again, so now it's going to be equal to 1. So we come through and we get this second little print string we did. The third time it comes through, it's equal to 2. We don't have a pin for 2. We could add one, but we don't need one. We only need to come through this node twice because we have the jump and then the double jump. So we're perfectly set up just like this. This is exactly what we need, with the one caveat being that every time we push a button, it's incrementing this counter and it's never actually resetting it, so we can never get back to doing this initial first. So it's actually, again, with Unreal, pretty simple. They give us a whole bunch of different stuff with this and with the character here. And what we want to do for a double jump is we want to reset the ability to jump, to do the double jump once we hit the ground. So let's go over here and right click. And what we want to do is we want to know when the character is grounded or it lands from a jump. So we could type in ground and we're not going to see anything here. So maybe let's try a different search and go for land. And you can see right away we have an event for OnLanded. So every time the character lands, this is going to fire. And we can test this again with our handy little print strings. So let's just throw landed in there. We'll jump in and let's see what happens. You can see landed is called there. Let's run off a ledge. Okay, landed. That's perfect. So that's exactly what we want. We want to be able to reset our double jump when that happens. By now, you've probably noticed that there's a reset, a little node in here. So we can go like that. And basically, when we land, it's going to reset this multi-gate back to its default state, which is with the start index of -1. So we're going to compile and play. Now I'm going to push space. I'm going to push it twice in a row. You can see we get first and second. I'm going to push it 3 times now. Really about 7 or 8. And you can see it only calls it twice. So again, once we land, we get first, second, and then we land, and it resets it. So now I can do it again. First, second, land. First, second, land. All right, perfect. We're set. All we have to do now is wire things up. So we have jump as a function. We saw that up here. And then let's go over here and add another jump. Now that we have our own jump section of input in here, we don't really want to be using the one that came with this anymore. So let's just go ahead and select that and delete it. Okay, so compile. So this looks like it should work. We have one jump is pressed. We're going to go through the multi-gate. And as long as we're in the air, we'll call through to jump, and then we'll call through to jump again. So let's go in here and try jumping twice. Okay, it doesn't seem to be doing anything. We only get the first jump and not the second. Now, the reason for that is that when you actually call jump, this is only going to allow you to jump if you're grounded. So for a double jump, we're not going to be grounded. We're going to be in the air already. So it's not going to quite work for our purposes. But we actually made something called a launch pad over here, and we had this little neat thing called launch character. So that is pretty much exactly what we want to be able to do. We want to be able to just launch the character. So let's go over here, type in launch. We have launch character. We'll provide a launch velocity. Let's say for a double jump, we want it to be something a little bit smaller, like the initial jump was, I believe it was 600. The initial jump velocity was 600. So let's make this half of that. So for the second jump, we only jump a little bit higher. We're going to click compile. Now let's give it a test. Not quite enough. It's only a little boost. Let's try bumping that up to maybe 450. Okay, that's better. So now we can double jump, and it won't let us triple jump, as you can see. So that is perfect. Now, let's just say in the odd case we actually wanted to add a triple jump. All we'd have to do is add a new pin here, and then launch character. And we'll say for the triple jump, we'll just basically bounce this up to 800. It'll be a huge jump. Click the compile button and save. So now let's see if we can triple jump. And we can. Super easy. Welcome to Unreal. Okay, so I mentioned that we're going to do this a second way. So this is one way to do it, the multi-gate, really handy way of doing things. But there's always in the world of programming, and visual scripting is programming. It's a more accessible version of programming, but it's still programming. You still have to follow through with the same kind of constructs. And really what all of these different things are doing is just calling C++ code under the covers. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this a little bit differently. So there's another really handy node that Unreal includes called a DoEnd node. So let's go ahead and see what we have here. We have DoEnd. We'll bring that in. And you can see first thing we have is something asking us for an integer, and it wants to know what n should be. So let's just do a little test here, and we'll put a 5 in. And on the exit, let's do a print, and we'll get the hello string when we push jump. So I'm going to push jump, and I'm continuously pushing jump right now. And you can see what happened was it displayed this string 5 times. So the DoEnd node is remembering how many times we entered into it, and then it's only going to go through this exit here. It's only going to call the next node if we're less than 5. So what can we do with that? We see we have this little counter here. So let's just find out what this is doing. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to drag it into here, and Unreal will automatically give us this toString node, which lets us take a number and print it. So we're going to compile and save, and I'm going to push it again, just continuously push the space bar. And you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then none of my subsequent presses do anything. Okay, so we can work with that. So first of all, we don't want 5, we want 2. We only want to be able to do a jump and a double jump. And we need to somehow be able to take what this counter is and convert that into the first time when it's 1, go over to jump, and the second time when it's 2, go over to launch character. And we could, programmers among us probably have a couple ideas in their head on how to do this. For the non-programmers, you might think, oh, you can just go over here and say, like, if that's equal to 2, do one thing, and if it's equal to 1, do another. That would be a branch in Unreal terminology. This is essentially just an if statement. And we could do that, but then we're going to end up with a bunch of different branches and checking a bunch of different things. What we have here is a case where we want to use something called a switch. So if I type in switch, you're going to see there's a ton of different things we can switch on. So if we type in switch and int, because we have an integer here, you'll see we have a switch on int. So this is perfect. We'll do exactly what we need. So we go ahead here, we have this counter, we're going to drag that in, and that's what we're going to switch on. So now we just need to know when it's 1, jump, when it's 2, launch. We're going to add pin, and let's see what we got. Okay, so we can see that each time we add a pin, it gives us a new number. And this is saying when this selection is equal to the number, go that way. So for this one, 1's going here, 2's going here, compile. Okay, no errors. So let's see what happens. Jumping in. So I'm going to double jump here. Can't jump anymore. Okay, that's not good. So why is that? This is, again, just like we saw with the multi-gate. When we land, we need to reset this. Because this just says it's going to check only twice. It's only going to let us through this exit node 2 times. So now if we reset when we land, we can actually come in here and jump and double jump. And then when we land, we can do it again. All right, that's it. So we got an introduction to a few more different nodes that Unreal offers in this one. We tinkered a bit with our character movement, and we saw a couple different ways to add functionality to Unreal. Hopefully you're starting to see how visual scripting and just Unreal in general, with all of the stuff that it gives us, really makes life easy. If we were to try and do this with Unity, it would be a pretty decent amount of of code to be able to get to this point, when in Unreal we have just a few little nodes here in this visual scripting editor. This is super accessible for programmers and also for artists. And that's one of the reasons why this series exists, because I want you to be able to see how quickly you can prototype with Unreal. You can jump in here and have a double jump, triple jump, whatever, all set up within a matter of minutes now that we've seen how it's done. All right, thanks for watching. We'll be back with more goodies in the near future.